On a cold, rainy evening in downtown Chicago, the streets were unusually quiet. The relentless drizzle had chased most people indoors, leaving only a few scattered figures braving the weather. Among them was Henry, a man who had no choice but to stay outside. He sat huddled on the corner of State Street, his thin blanket barely shielding him from the biting wind and icy raindrops that fell steadily from the dark sky. His clothes, worn and patched up countless times, clung to his body, soaked through, with water. But Henry didn't complain. He hadn't complained about anything in years. Henry wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, he had been a proud construction worker, known for his strong hands and tireless work ethic. He'd built homes, offices, and schools across the city, earning enough money to support himself and even dream of starting a family someday. But life had other plans. A devastating injury at a job site left him unable to perform the physical labor he once excelled at. With medical bills piling up and no savings to fall back on, he lost his apartment, then his car, and eventually, everything else. For nearly 2 years now, Henry had called the streets his home. Despite everything, Henry still carried a small spark of dignity within him. Even when hunger gnawed at his stomach or loneliness weighed heavily on his heart, he refused to beg. Instead, he spent his days scavenging for scraps of food, collecting bottles to recycle for a few coins, and occasionally helping others whenever he could. People often mistook his quiet demeanor for aloofness, but deep down, Henry cared deeply about the world around him. He just didn't have much left to give. That night, however, something unusual caught his attention. As he rummaged through his tattered backpack, searching for a granola bar he thought he might have tucked away earlier, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A woman stood a short distance away, her silhouette illuminated faintly by the flickering street lamp above her. She was standing beside a sleek BMW, its headlights casting a soft glow onto the wet pavement. At first glance, she seemed out of place among the grime and shadows of the street. Her coat looked expensive, her shoes polished, yet there was an unmistakable air of distress surrounding her. Curiosity got the better of Henry. Slowly, he rose to his feet, wincing slightly as his stiff joints protested against the movement. Wrapping his soggy blanket tighter around his shoulders, he approached her cautiously. "Ma'am?" he called out softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman turned abruptly, her wide eyes reflecting both fear and relief. Up close, Henry could see that she was younger than he'd initially thought. Perhaps in her late 20s or early 30s. Her makeup had smudged, likely from tears, and her hair clung damply to her face. She hugged herself tightly, as if trying to ward off the chill of the rain. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then finally she broke the silence. I'm stuck," she stammered, her voice trembling. "My tire's flat, and I don't know what to do. My phone's dead, and I'm miles away from home." Her words came out in a rush, each syllable heavy with desperation. "I've never changed a tire before." Henry nodded slowly, taking in the situation. The rear passenger side tire of the BMW was indeed completely deflated, sagging against the ground like a defeated balloon. He glanced around, noting how deserted the area was. No taxis passed by. No pedestrians lingered nearby. It was just the two of them under the unforgiving rain. Without hesitation, Henry reached into his backpack and pulled out an old wrench. It was rusty and dented, a relic from his days working construction, but it would get the job done. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said gently. "I can help you fix it." The woman blinked in surprise. You will?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But aren't you—" She trailed off, perhaps unsure how to phrase her question without sounding rude. "Aren't I what?" Henry chuckled softly, though there was no bitterness in his tone. "Homeless? Yeah, I am. But that doesn't mean I can't lend a hand." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Claire, by the way." "Henry." he replied with a small smile. And with that, he set to work. The rain continued to pour as Henry knelt beside the car, positioning himself carefully to avoid slipping on the slick pavement. Using the wrench, he loosened the lug nuts one by one, his fingers numb from the cold, but steady nonetheless. Claire watched silently, occasionally offering to hold something or shield him from the rain with her umbrella. But Henry waved her off, insisting she stay dry while he worked. As he labored, Claire couldn't help but marvel at the scene unfolding before her. Here was a man who clearly had so little: no home, no warm clothes, no protection from the elements, and yet he was giving her everything he could. His actions weren't fueled by obligation or expectation. They came purely from a place of kindness. It made her feel guilty, almost ashamed, for the fleeting doubts she'd harbored earlier. How many times had she walked past someone like Henry on the street, dismissing them as invisible or inconsequential? Now, faced with his generosity, she realized how wrong she had been. When the last lug nut was tightened and the spare tire securely in place, Henry stood up, brushing his hands against his jeans. "There you go," he said, his breath visible in the chilly air. "You should be good to go now." Claire stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of frustration or fear. They were tears of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached into her purse, pulling out a handful of bills. "Please, take this. You deserve it." But Henry shook his head firmly. "No, ma'am," he said. "I don't want your money. Just promise me you'll get home safe, all right?" For a moment, Claire was speechless. She wanted to argue, to insist that he accept some form of compensation, but she knew it wouldn't change his mind. Instead, she extended her hand. "Thank you, Henry. Really. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know." Henry hesitated for a brief second, then shook her hand. "Take care, Claire," he said simply, and with that, she climbed into her car and drove off into the night, leaving Henry standing alone on the curb once more. Though he returned to his usual spot and wrapped himself in his damp blanket, Henry felt a strange warmth inside him. A warmth that had nothing to do with the rain or the chill. Helping Claire had reminded him of something important. Even in the darkest moments, there was still light to be found. And sometimes, all it took was one act of kindness to remind someone of their own humanity. Little did Henry know his simple gesture would soon lead to something extraordinary. The rain continued to fall as Claire drove away, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: relief that her car was fixed, guilt over her initial hesitation to trust Henry, and overwhelming gratitude for his selflessness. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of him standing on the curb before he disappeared into the blur of rain-soaked streets. His image lingered in her thoughts long after she turned onto the highway. Claire had always considered herself a compassionate person. She volunteered at local shelters during the holidays, donated clothes to charity drives, and occasionally tipped generously when she encountered someone in need. But tonight was different. Tonight, she hadn't just observed poverty from a distance. She had come face to face with it. And what struck her most wasn't Henry's appearance or circumstances. It was his heart. Despite having so little, he had given her everything he could. He had braved the freezing rain, ignored his own discomfort, and worked tirelessly to help a complete stranger. It was humbling, eye-opening, and deeply inspiring. As she navigated the slick roads, Claire couldn't stop thinking about Henry. What must it be like to live on the streets? To wake up every day without knowing where your next meal would come from, or whether you'd find shelter from the elements. She tried to imagine herself in his shoes, but the thought made her chest tighten. How did someone endure such hardship without losing hope? Yet Henry hadn't seemed hopeless. Even soaked to the bone and visibly exhausted, he had smiled faintly as he sent her on her way. That smile haunted her, not because it was sad, but because it carried a quiet strength she couldn't ignore. By the time Claire reached her apartment, The rain had eased into a light drizzle. She parked her car in the underground garage and trudged upstairs, still lost in thought. Her cozy living room, with its plush couches and soft lighting, felt almost alien compared to the harsh reality she had witnessed earlier. She peeled off her wet coat and sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The contrast between her life and Henry's was staggering. She had a roof over her head, food in her fridge, and countless opportunities at her fingertips. Meanwhile, Henry slept on a cold, hard sidewalk, relying on scraps and the kindness of strangers to survive. It didn't seem fair. For hours, Claire sat there, unable to shake the image of Henry huddled under his thin blanket. She replayed their brief encounter in her mind, analyzing every detail, the way he had approached her cautiously, the determination in his voice as he assured her he could fix the tire, the gentle refusal when she offered him money. Each moment reinforced her growing admiration for him. He wasn't just a man down on his luck, he was someone who embodied resilience, dignity, and compassion. And Claire realized something important. If she truly wanted to honor his act of kindness, she needed to do more than feel grateful. She needed to take action. The next morning, Claire woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. After brewing herself a cup of coffee, she opened her laptop and began researching organizations that helped homeless individuals. There were dozens of them scattered across Chicago: shelters, job training programs, mental health services, but none seemed quite right for Henry. He didn't just need temporary assistance, he needed a lifeline, a chance to rebuild his life. Claire knew she couldn't tackle this alone, so she reached out to a close friend named Marcus, who ran a successful contracting company. "Marcus, I need your help," Claire said over the phone, her tone serious. "There's someone I met last night, a guy named Henry. He used to work in construction, but an injury left him unable to keep his job. Now he's homeless, but he's incredibly skilled and willing to work. I want to help him get back on his feet." Marcus listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about Henry's background and skills. When Claire finished explaining, he agreed to meet Henry and assess whether he might be a good fit for one of his projects. "If he's as capable as you say he is, I'll make sure we find a place for him," Marcus promised. "Just let me know when and where." With Marcus on board, Claire turned her attention to finding Henry immediate support. She contacted a local shelter known for its comprehensive rehabilitation programs. The director, a kind woman named Linda, assured Claire they had space available for someone like Henry. "We can provide him with temporary housing, meals, and access to counseling services," Linda explained. "But we'll also help him develop a plan for long-term stability." Relieved and excited, Claire spent the rest of the day preparing. She drafted a letter introducing Henry to the shelter staff, highlighting his strengths and potential. She also gathered some essentials: warm clothing, toiletries, and a prepaid phone, to give him when she saw him again. Every step of the process filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she wasn't just writing checks or attending fundraisers. She was actively making a difference in someone's life. That evening, Claire returned to State Street, her heart pounding with anticipation. Would Henry still be there? Had he moved on? As she approached the familiar corner, she spotted him immediately. He was sitting in the same spot, wrapped in his soggy blanket, staring at the ground. Relief washed over her. She pulled her car to a stop nearby and stepped out, clutching the bag of supplies she had brought. Henry looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Claire?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I came back to thank you properly," Claire replied, smiling warmly. She handed him the bag. "And to offer you a chance at a new beginning." Henry hesitated, glancing inside the bag. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the neatly folded clothes, toiletries, and phone. I don't understand," he stammered. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve it," Claire said firmly. She explained everything she had arranged: the temporary housing at the shelter, the job interview with Marcus, and the resources available to help him regain his independence. "You've already proven how strong and resourceful you are, Henry. All I'm doing is giving you the tools to build a better future." Tears welled up in Henry's eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "No one's ever done anything like this for me before." "You don't have to say anything," Claire replied softly. "Just promise me you'll give it a shot. You've got so much to offer the world. You just need the right opportunity." Henry nodded slowly, a mixture of hope and apprehension written across his face. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change for the better. And as Claire helped him gather his belongings and led him to her car, she couldn't help but feel a surge of optimism. This was only the beginning for both of them. The shelter was located in a quiet part of the city, tucked away from the chaos of downtown. It wasn't a glamorous building, just a modest 3-story structure with peeling paint and creaky floors. But to Henry, it felt like a palace. As Claire pulled up outside, she could see the hesitation in his eyes. He sat silently in the passenger seat, clutching the bag of supplies she had given him, staring at the entrance as if trying to decide whether he belonged there. "It's okay," Claire said gently, breaking the silence. "You're not alone here. Everyone inside has been where you are now, and they'll understand." Henry nodded slowly but didn't respond. Claire understood his apprehension. For someone who had spent years living on the streets, stepping into a place like this must have felt overwhelming. But she also knew that taking the first step toward change was often the hardest part. She stepped out of the car and walked around to open his door, offering him a reassuring smile. Together they made their way inside. The lobby smelled faintly of bleach and coffee, a comforting mix that hinted at both cleanliness and warmth. A young woman named Lisa greeted them at the front desk, her demeanor friendly yet professional. "Welcome, Henry," she said warmly after Claire introduced him. "We're glad you're here." Lisa led them to a small office where Linda, the director Claire had spoken to earlier, was waiting. She rose from her chair as they entered, extending a hand to Henry. "It's nice to meet you," she said kindly. "Claire has told me a lot about you, and I think we can really help you get back on your feet." Henry shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. Claire gave his arm a gentle squeeze before sitting down beside him. Over the next hour, Linda explained everything the shelter had to offer: temporary housing in a private room, 3 meals a day, access to counseling services, and workshops designed to teach life skills like budgeting, resume writing, and interview preparation. There was even a computer lab where residents could search for jobs or take online courses. "We'll work with you to create a personalized plan based on your goals," Linda added, "and once you're ready, we'll help you transition into permanent housing and employment." Henry listened intently, nodding occasionally, but saying little. When Linda finished speaking, she handed him a folder containing brochures and forms. "Take your time looking through these," she encouraged. "And don't hesitate to ask questions. We're here to support you every step of the way." Afterward, Lisa showed Henry to his room. It was small but clean, with a twin bed, a dresser, and a desk. A single window let in soft afternoon light, casting a golden glow over the space. To anyone else it might have seemed plain, but to Henry, it was nothing short of miraculous. For the first time in years, he had walls to shield him from the world, a lock on his door, and a roof that wouldn't leak when it rained. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Henry couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of gratitude, doubt, and fear. What if he messed this up? What if he wasn't good enough? The kindness Claire and the shelter staff had shown him was overwhelming, and it came with an unspoken expectation that he rise to the occasion and prove himself worthy of their trust. He didn't want to disappoint them, or himself. Over the following days, Henry began settling into his new routine. Each morning, he attended group meetings where residents shared their struggles and victories. At first, he kept mostly to himself, listening quietly as others spoke about battles with addiction, mental health challenges, and broken relationships. But gradually, he started opening up, sharing pieces of his own story. He talked about losing his job, the shame of becoming homeless, and the loneliness that had consumed him for so long. Hearing others relate to his experiences made him feel less isolated, less like an outsider looking in. In the afternoons, he joined workshops focused on practical skills. One session taught him how to write a resume that highlighted his construction experience without drawing attention to the gap in his employment history. Another helped him practice answering common interview questions confidently. The instructors were patient and encouraging, reminding him that mistakes were part of the learning process. By the end of each class, Henry left feeling a little more capable, a little more hopeful. Claire visited regularly, checking in on his progress and bringing updates about the job interview Marcus had promised. "He's excited to meet you," she told Henry one evening as they sat together in the shelter's communal lounge. "He says he's got a project starting next week that could use someone with your expertise." Despite her enthusiasm, Henry remained cautious. The idea of returning to work filled him with equal parts excitement and anxiety. Could he still handle the physical demands of construction? Would his injury flare up again? And what if Marcus decided he wasn't the right fit after all? These doubts gnawed at him, threatening to undermine the confidence Claire and the shelter staff worked so hard to build. But Claire refused to let him dwell on negativity. "You've already overcome so much," she reminded him firmly. "Don't let fear hold you back now, you've got this." Finally, the day of the interview arrived. Henry dressed carefully in the clothes Claire had bought him, a pair of dark slacks, a crisp white shirt, and polished shoes. Standing in front of the mirror in the shelter's bathroom, he barely recognized the man staring back at him. Gone was the scruffy, rain-soaked figure who had fixed Claire's tire weeks ago. In his place stood someone poised, determined, and ready to reclaim his life. When Henry arrived at Marcus's office, he was greeted warmly by a team of contractors who treated him like an old friend rather than a potential hire. They discussed his past projects, his strengths, and how he envisioned contributing to their upcoming assignments. Marcus listened intently, nodding approvingly as Henry spoke. When the meeting ended, Marcus shook his hand firmly. "We'd be lucky to have you on board," he said with a grin. "Let's get you started." As Henry walked out of the office, a sense of pride swelled within him. For the first time in years, he felt like he mattered, not because someone pitied him, but because he had earned their respect. He called Claire immediately to share the news, his voice trembling with emotion. "I got the job," he said simply. But the weight of those 4 words carried more meaning than any sentence he'd ever spoken. That night, as he lay in his bed at the shelter, Henry reflected on how far he'd come. Just a few weeks ago, he had been a man resigned to his fate, convinced that life had nothing more to offer him. Now he was surrounded by people who believed in him, opportunities that challenged him, and a future that no longer felt out of reach. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it head on. And deep down, he vowed to never forget the kindness that had brought him here, the same kindness he hoped to pay forward someday. It had been several months since Henry began his journey toward a new life, and the changes in him were remarkable. The once frail man who had sat huddled on the streets now walked with a renewed sense of purpose. His cheeks were fuller, his eyes brighter, and his hands, though still calloused from years of hard work, were steady and confident. Every morning he woke up early, dressed neatly, and headed to the construction site where Marcus's team was working on a new housing development. It wasn't just any project. It was a chance for Henry to rebuild not only homes but also his own identity. At first, returning to construction work felt strange. His body ached after long hours on the job, and there were moments when doubt crept. And could he keep up? Would his injury return to haunt him? But each time he questioned himself, he remembered Claire's unwavering belief in him and the countless people at the shelter who had cheered him on. Slowly but surely, he regained his strength and rhythm. The other workers welcomed him warmly, treating him like family. On lunch breaks, they joked about old jobs, shared stories of their lives outside work, and occasionally teased Henry about how much coffee he drank to stay energized. Henry quickly proved himself indispensable. His years of experience made him an expert problem solver, often finding solutions to challenges that stumped even the younger crew members. When a tricky plumbing issue threatened to delay progress on one section of the building, Henry suggested a simple yet effective fix that saved the team hours of frustration. "You're a lifesaver," Marcus said with a grin as he patted Henry on the back. "I knew we made the right call hiring you." But Henry didn't stop at excelling at his job. Inspired by the support he'd received, he began mentoring newer workers, especially those who reminded him of his younger self, eager but unsure of their abilities. He taught them shortcuts, safety tips, and how to read blueprints efficiently. Watching others grow under his guidance filled him with pride. For so long, he had felt invisible, as though his contributions didn't matter. Now he realized the opposite was true. His knowledge and experience were valuable, and sharing them gave him a deeper sense of fulfillment than he'd ever imagined. Meanwhile, Claire continued to play a vital role in Henry's life. She visited him regularly, bringing updates about her own projects and checking in on his progress. Their conversations ranged from lighthearted banter about TV shows to deeper discussions about resilience, gratitude, and the importance of giving back. Over time, their bond grew stronger, evolving into a friendship neither of them had anticipated, but both cherished deeply. One evening, as they sat together in a small cafe near the construction site, Claire leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Henry, have you ever thought about what you want to do next?" she asked. "I mean, beyond this job." Henry paused, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Truthfully, he hadn't allowed himself to dream too far ahead. Surviving day to day had consumed most of his energy for years. But now, with stability slowly becoming a reality, he dared to consider possibilities he'd long dismissed as unreachable. "I guess I've thought about helping others," he admitted finally. "Like, maybe starting something where I can guide people who are trying to get back on their feet, like I did." Claire's face lit up. "That's amazing," she said, earnestly. "You'd be incredible at it. Have you thought about how you do it?" Henry shrugged, a mix of excitement and uncertainty crossing his features. "Not really. I don't know the first thing about running something like that. Plus, I wouldn't even know where to start." "Well, let me help you figure it out," Claire replied without hesitation. "We can brainstorm ideas, look into funding options, and find spaces that might work. You've already inspired so many people. You deserve to share your story on a bigger scale." Her words ignited a spark within Henry. For days afterward, he couldn't stop thinking about the idea. What if he could create a place where others like him could find hope and healing? A space that offered not just shelter, but also mentorship, training, and a community built on mutual respect and understanding. The more he imagined it, the more real it felt. With Claire's encouragement, Henry started researching organizations similar to what he envisioned. They visited community centers, attended workshops on nonprofit management, and met with experts who offered advice on everything from securing grants to recruiting volunteers. Each step brought him closer to turning his vision into reality, but it also tested his patience and resolve. There were moments when paperwork seemed endless or when rejections from potential donors left him feeling defeated. Yet every setback only strengthened his determination to push forward. Then came the day when everything clicked into place. A local church offered to rent them a vacant building at a discounted rate. A group of retired contractors volunteered to help renovate the space, transforming it into a functional center complete with classrooms, offices, and a communal kitchen. Donations poured in, from tools and furniture to food and clothing, all thanks to Claire's relentless networking and Henry's heartfelt appeals to friends and former colleagues. Finally, after months of planning and preparation, the grand opening arrived. On a crisp autumn morning, Henry stood outside the newly christened Hope Rising Community Center, its freshly painted sign gleaming in the sunlight. Inside, tables were set up with informational brochures, snacks, and warm beverages for visitors. Volunteers bustled around, ensuring everything was perfect for the big event. As guests began arriving, shelter residents, local officials, and curious neighbors alike, Henry felt a surge of nerves mixed with exhilaration. When it was time to speak, Claire gently nudged him toward the microphone. The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on him expectantly. Henry took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the podium as he scanned the room. This was it, the moment he had worked so hard for. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "A few years ago, I never would have dreamed I'd be standing here talking to all of you. Back then, I was living on the streets, convinced that my life was over. But one rainy night, a kind stranger named Claire changed everything. She didn't just fix my tire. She reminded me that no matter how low you fall, there's always a way to rise again." He paused, glancing at Claire, who smiled encouragingly from the front row. "This center is for everyone who's ever felt lost, forgotten, or hopeless. It's proof that kindness has power, that one act of compassion can set off a chain reaction leading to incredible change. My hope is that anyone who walks through these doors leaves feeling stronger, more capable, and ready to take on whatever comes next." The audience erupted into applause, some cheering while others wiped away tears. Afterward, dozens of people approached Henry to shake his hand, hug him, or simply thank him for creating such a meaningful resource. For the rest of the day, he moved from conversation to conversation, soaking in the joy and gratitude radiating from everyone around him. That night, as he locked up the center and prepared to head home, Henry stood alone in the quiet lobby. The weight of what he had accomplished settled over him, filling him with a profound sense of peace. He thought about the long road that had led him here, the struggles, the doubts, the moments of despair, and realized that none of it had been wasted. Every challenge had shaped him into the person he was today, someone capable of making a difference. As he stepped outside, the cool evening air greeted him like an old friend. Above him, stars twinkled against the dark sky, their light guiding him forward. Henry smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning. The center was a testament to the power of second chances, and he intended to ensure that everyone who entered its doors found theirs. Because sometimes, all it takes is one spark of hope to ignite a lifetime of possibilities. The Hope Rising Community Center quickly became a beacon of hope in the community. Word spread fast about the center's mission to uplift those struggling with homelessness, unemployment, and personal challenges. People from all walks of life began showing up, some seeking shelter, others looking for guidance, and many simply wanting to contribute their time or resources. Henry watched with pride as the space transformed into a hub of activity, buzzing with energy and purpose. Every morning, he arrived early to oversee operations, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The communal kitchen served hot meals prepared by volunteers, while classrooms hosted workshops on topics ranging from financial literacy to job interview skills. In one corner of the building, retired professionals offered free counseling sessions, helping residents tackle mental health issues or substance abuse problems. And in another, a team of mentors worked closely with individuals to create personalized plans for long-term stability. It was more than just a center. It was a lifeline for those who had nowhere else to turn. For Henry, running the center wasn't just a job, it was his calling. He poured every ounce of energy into making sure each person who walked through the doors felt seen, heard, and valued. Whether it was sitting down with a resident to discuss their goals, teaching a hands-on construction workshop, or simply sharing a meal and listening to someone's story, Henry gave his all. His compassion and dedication inspired everyone around him, earning him the nickname Coach among the staff and volunteers. One of the most rewarding aspects of the center was witnessing the transformations that took place within its walls. Take Marcus, for example, a young man who had come to the center after losing his job and apartment following a string of bad decisions. At first, Marcus was skeptical, convinced that no one could help him, but under Henry's mentorship, he slowly regained confidence. He attended the workshops, learned new skills, and eventually landed a stable job at a local warehouse. Months later, when Marcus returned to the center to thank Henry, tears welled up in both their eyes. "You didn't just give me a second chance," Marcus said. "You taught me how to believe in myself again." Then there was Lisa, a single mother of two who had been living out of her car after fleeing an abusive relationship. When she first arrived at the center, she was hesitant to trust anyone, her guard firmly up. But over time, the supportive environment helped her heal. She enrolled in a vocational training program offered by the center, learning graphic design, skills that allowed her to secure freelance work. Within a year, she saved enough money to rent a small apartment for her family. On moving day, she brought her kids to meet Henry, presenting him with a handmade card that read, "Thank you for giving us a home and a future." Stories like these filled Henry's days with meaning. Yet despite the countless successes, not every journey ended happily. Some residents struggled to break free from destructive habits, while others disappeared without warning, leaving behind unanswered questions. Each setback weighed heavily on Henry, reminding him of the fragility of progress. But instead of letting these moments discourage him, he used them as fuel to keep pushing forward. After all, even if only one person found hope because of the center, it would still be worth it. Claire remained a constant presence in Henry's life, offering advice, encouragement, and occasional reality checks when needed. She marveled at how far he had come since that rainy night on State Street. "You've built something incredible here," she told him during one of her visits. "But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. You can't pour from an empty cup." Henry chuckled softly but knew she was right. Running the center was demanding, and there were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. To combat burnout, he started carving out time for himself, going for evening walks, reading books Claire recommended, and reconnecting with hobbies he hadn't touched in years. These small acts of self-care helped him stay grounded, reminding him that taking care of himself was just as important as taking care of others. As the months turned into years, the center continued to grow. Donations increased, allowing them to expand services and hire additional staff. Local businesses partnered with the center, providing internships and employment opportunities for residents. Schools sent students to volunteer, fostering a sense of connection between generations. Even city officials took notice, praising the center as a model for addressing homelessness and poverty effectively. But perhaps the greatest testament to the center's impact was the way it fostered a sense of community. Residents often stayed beyond their initial needs, volunteering their time to help newcomers adjust. Former attendees returned regularly to share updates on their lives, bringing food, supplies, or simply words of encouragement. The center had become more than a resource. It was a family, bound together by shared struggles and triumphs. One chilly winter evening, as Henry sat in his office reviewing reports, he heard laughter echoing from the main hall. Curious, he stepped outside to investigate. What he saw warmed his heart. A group of residents and volunteers gathered around a piano, singing holiday songs off-key but with infectious enthusiasm. Someone had decorated the room with twinkling lights and paper snowflakes, creating a cozy, festive atmosphere. For a moment, Henry stood silently in the doorway, taking it all in. "Hey, coach," one of the volunteers called out, spotting him. "Come join us." Henry hesitated briefly before stepping inside. Within seconds, he was handed a mug of hot cocoa and pulled into the circle. As they sang and laughed together, he realized something profound. This was what true happiness felt like. Not wealth or fame, but the simple joy of belonging to a place, a purpose, and a group of people who genuinely cared. Later that night, as he locked up the center and headed home, Henry reflected on how much his life had changed. From a man with nothing but a tattered backpack and a broken spirit, he had become someone who inspired others to rise above their circumstances. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but he faced them with unwavering determination. Because now, he understood something fundamental. Hope wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice. And every day he chose to embrace it. Little did Henry know, however, that his journey was far from over. While the center thrived, new opportunities and unexpected challenges were waiting just around the corner. But for now, as he gazed at the stars twinkling above, he allowed himself a rare moment of contentment. The past had shaped him, the present fulfilled him, and the future? Well, the future held endless possibilities. All he had to do was keep moving forward, one step, one act of kindness, and one hopeful heart at a time. Years passed, and the Hope Rising Community Center became a cornerstone of the neighborhood. Its reputation spread far beyond Chicago, drawing attention from news outlets, philanthropists, and even government officials eager to learn how such a grassroots initiative had achieved so much. Henry found himself giving interviews, attending conferences, and speaking at events about the power of compassion and community-driven change. Yet despite the growing recognition, he remained grounded, always reminding himself and others that the center's success wasn't his alone. It belonged to everyone who had walked through its doors, contributed their time, or simply believed in its mission. One crisp spring morning, as Henry stood outside the center greeting visitors for a fundraising event, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. At first, he didn't recognize her. The young woman wore a tailored blazer, her hair styled neatly, but something about her gait stirred a memory. Then she smiled, and it hit him. It was Claire. "Henry!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. She looked radiant, her eyes bright with excitement. "I hope you don't mind me crashing your party." "Claire," Henry exclaimed, stepping forward to hug her. "What are you doing here? I thought you were traveling for work this week." "I was," she replied, pulling back to study his face. "But when I heard about today's event, I couldn't miss it besides." She paused, glancing around at the bustling crowd. "I wanted to see firsthand how far this place has come." Henry chuckled, gesturing toward the lively scene. Volunteers manned booths selling baked goods and handmade crafts, while children played games set up on the lawn. A local band performed upbeat tunes, drawing applause from spectators. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation, a testament to the sense of unity the center inspired. "It's not bad for a little idea that started with fixing a flat tire, huh?" Henry joked, though his tone carried genuine pride. "It's incredible," Claire said softly, her gaze lingering on the happy faces around them. "You've created something truly special here, Henry. Something that will keep changing lives for generations." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For all the challenges they'd faced along the way, the late nights, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, this was what made it all worthwhile. Every smile, every story of triumph, every life touched by the center reinforced his belief that kindness could ripple outward, touching countless people in ways no one could predict. As the day unfolded, Henry introduced Claire to some of the center's residents and staff, sharing anecdotes about their journeys. He pointed out Lisa, now running her own graphic design business, chatting animatedly with potential clients near the art display. Nearby, Marcus helped kids assemble toy cars at a crafting station, his confidence shining through every interaction. Even Linda, the shelter director who had welcomed Henry years ago, stopped by to thank Claire for her role in bringing the center to life. "You know, none of this would have happened without you," Henry said later, as they sat together under a shaded tent sipping lemonade. "If you hadn't shown up that night, I might still be sitting on that curb thinking my life was over." Claire shook her head firmly. "Don't give me too much credit. You're the one who did the hard work. I just gave you a nudge." "A pretty big nudge," Henry countered with a grin. "But seriously, Claire, thank you for believing in me when no one else did, including myself." Their conversation turned reflective as they discussed the lessons they'd learned along the way. Both agreed that helping others wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping changes. It was about showing up, listening, and offering whatever support you could. Sometimes it meant fixing a tire in the rain. Other times it meant creating a space where people felt safe enough to dream again. Either way, it required patience, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to making the world a little brighter. By evening, the event wound down, leaving behind piles of donated goods, stacks of cash contributions, and countless promises of continued support. As Henry locked up the center, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success of the fundraiser, but for the journey that had brought him here. From the darkest nights on the streets to the brightest days at the center, every step had been worth it. The next morning, however, an unexpected challenge arose. A city official arrived unannounced, bearing news that threatened to shake the foundation of everything Henry had built. Budget cuts meant the center's lease agreement with the church property owner was in jeopardy. Without immediate action, they risked losing the building entirely. For a moment, panic gripped Henry. How could they possibly relocate? Where would they find another space large enough to accommodate their programs? But as quickly as the fear surfaced, it dissolved into resolve. This wasn't the first obstacle they'd faced, and it wouldn't be the last. With Claire's help, he rallied the community, launching a crowdfunding campaign and organizing town hall meetings to raise awareness. Local businesses stepped up, offering discounted rentals or temporary spaces until a permanent solution emerged. Once again, the power of collective effort proved unstoppable. Months later, after navigating negotiations and securing funding, the center moved to a larger, more accessible location. The new building boasted modern facilities, expanded classrooms, and even a small garden where residents grew vegetables and flowers. It was a fresh start, a testament to the resilience and determination of everyone involved. On the day of the grand reopening, Henry stood before a cheering crowd, overwhelmed by emotion. "This isn't just a building," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "It's proof that when we come together, we can overcome anything. Every brick, every beam, every person here represents hope, the kind of hope that doesn't fade, no matter how tough things get." As fireworks lit up the night sky to celebrate the occasion, Henry slipped away briefly to sit alone in the garden. He closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over him. In that quiet moment, he reflected on the chain reaction sparked by a single act of kindness years ago. Helping Claire fix her tire had led to her helping him, which in turn allowed him to help countless others, and now those same individuals were paying it forward, creating ripples of positivity that extended far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Henry opened his eyes and smiled. Life hadn't gone according to plan. It rarely did. But that was okay. What mattered wasn't the destination, it was the journey. And as long as there were people willing to lend a hand, offer a listening ear, or share a moment of connection, there would always be hope. With that thought, Henry rose to rejoin the celebration, ready to embrace whatever came next. Because sometimes all it takes is one spark of kindness to ignite a lifetime of possibilities. And for Henry, that spark had grown into a flame that would never go out.